What if I told you that the single most devastating event in human history ended not with a whimper, but with two blinding flashes of light that vaporized entire cities in seconds? By 1945, after 6 years of unimaginable carnage, the world had become numb to death. Millions had perished in concentration camps. Cities had been reduced to rubble. Entire nations had been erased from the map. But nothing could have prepared humanity for what happened on August 6, the year 1945, when atomic weapons were unleashed for the first and only time in warfare. Those two explosions didn't just end World War II. They fundamentally changed the nature of human civilization forever. But here's what most people don't realize. Those atomic bombs almost weren't dropped at all. And if a few key decisions had gone differently, the war might have dragged on for years longer, costing millions more lives. Today, we're going to explore the complete story of World War II, from its twisted origins in the aftermath of World War I to its apocalyptic conclusion in the atomic age. And I promise you'll see this familiar story in a completely new light. Hey, everyone, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we're about to embark on the most comprehensive journey through World War II you've ever experienced. This isn't just going to be a dry recitation of dates and battles. We're going to understand why this war happened, how it escalated from a border dispute in Poland to a truly global conflict that touched every continent, and most importantly, how it transformed our world in ways we're still grappling with today. So settle in, because this is going to be an epic journey through humanity's darkest hour. The story of World War II really begins on June 28, 1919, in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, near Paris. This was where the victorious Allied powers forced Germany to sign a peace treaty ending World War I, and it was one of the most vengeful peace settlements in modern history. Germany was stripped of all its colonies, forced to surrender significant territory in Europe, required to pay massive financial reparations that would cripple its economy for decades, and most humiliatingly, forced to accept full responsibility for starting the war. The German military was reduced to a token force, barely capable of maintaining internal order. German representatives signed the treaty under protest, and the German people never accepted it. This sense of national humiliation and betrayal would poison German politics for the next 2 decades. Into this toxic atmosphere stepped a failed Austrian artist and World War I veteran named Adolf Hitler. In 1919, Hitler joined a tiny political party in Munich that would eventually become the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. Hitler proved to be a spellbinding public speaker who could articulate the rage and resentment millions of Germans felt. He blamed Germany's defeat on a stab in the back by Jews and communists, promised to tear up the Treaty of Versailles, and vowed to make Germany the dominant power in Europe. But the Nazis remained a fringe movement until the Great Depression struck in 1929. When the American stock market crashed, the economic catastrophe spread globally. Germany, whose economy had been artificially propped up by American loans, collapsed almost overnight. By 1932, over 6 million Germans were unemployed. In their desperation, more and more Germans turned to extremist parties promising radical solutions. In January 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany in a backroom political deal. Within months, he had seized dictatorial powers, banned all opposition parties, and begun transforming Germany into a totalitarian state based on racial ideology and militarism. Hitler's foreign policy was breathtakingly audacious. In 1935, He openly began rearming Germany in violation of the Versailles Treaty. In 1936, he sent troops into the demilitarized Rhineland. In 1938, he annexed Austria and then demanded the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. At each step, Britain and France protested but did nothing, hoping to avoid another war. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain even flew to Munich to negotiate with Hitler, returning with an agreement he claimed guaranteed peace for our time. It was wishful thinking at best, cowardice at worst. Meanwhile, across the world, other aggressive powers were on the rise. In Japan, military leaders had taken control of the government and were pursuing violent expansion in Asia. They had invaded Manchuria in 1931 and launched a full-scale war against China in 1937, committing horrific atrocities, including the rape of Nanking, where Japanese soldiers murdered hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians. In Italy, the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini dreamed of recreating the Roman Empire and invaded Ethiopia in 1935, using poison gas against poorly armed defenders. In March 1939, Hitler broke his promises and seized the rest of Czechoslovakia. Even Chamberlain now realized Hitler couldn't be appeased. Britain and France guaranteed Poland's independence, but Hitler was convinced they were bluffing. To protect himself from a two-front war, Hitler pulled off a diplomatic masterstroke that shocked the world. On August 23, 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, supposedly mortal enemies, signed a non-aggression pact. Secretly, they agreed to divide Eastern Europe between them, with Poland caught in the middle. On September 1, 1939, after staging a fake Polish attack on a German radio station to use as propaganda, Hitler unleashed his forces against Poland. The world witnessed a new kind of warfare called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. German tanks, supported by dive bombers and followed by motorized infantry, tore through Polish defenses. Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3 RD, but they did virtually nothing to help Poland. When the Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east, on September 17, Poland's fate was sealed. By early October, the country had ceased to exist, divided between two of history's most brutal dictatorships. For the next several months, almost nothing happened in the West. French and British forces sat behind their fortifications, while Germany consolidated its position. This became known as the Phony War. But on May 10, 1940, the Phony War ended with explosive violence. Germany invaded Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and France simultaneously. While everyone expected the Germans to attack through Belgium like they had in World War I, the main thrust came through the Ardennes forest, which the French had considered impassable for tanks. German armored divisions burst through, raced to the English Channel, and cut off British and French forces in Belgium. The speed of the German conquest was staggering. The Netherlands fell in 5 days. Belgium surrendered after 18 days. British forces evacuated from Dunkirk in late May, leaving behind all their equipment. And on June 22, 1940, just 6 weeks after the invasion began, France surrendered. Hitler forced the French to sign the armistice in the same railway car where Germany had surrendered in 1918, a calculated humiliation. France was divided into a German-occupied zone in the north and a collaborationist puppet state in the south based in Vichy. Britain now stood alone. Winston Churchill, who had replaced Chamberlain as Prime Minister in May, refused Hitler's peace offers and vowed that Britain would fight on. Hitler planned an invasion of Britain called Operation Sea Lion. But first, he needed air superiority. The Battle of Britain, fought entirely in the skies over southern England in the summer and fall of 1940, saw the Royal Air Force, outnumbered but flying superior fighters and aided by radar, inflict such heavy losses on the German Luftwaffe that Hitler postponed and eventually cancelled the invasion. Having failed to defeat Britain, Hitler turned his attention to his ultimate goal, the conquest of the Soviet Union and the destruction of communism. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military operation in history. Over 3 million German soldiers, supported by thousands of tanks and aircraft, invaded along a front stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The initial German advance was devastating. Soviet forces were caught unprepared despite numerous warnings, and hundreds of thousands were killed or captured in the first weeks. But the Soviets didn't collapse. They fought with desperate ferocity, and the vast distances of Russia began to work against the Germans. When winter arrived and the Germans were still fighting outside Moscow, poorly equipped for the brutal cold, the Soviets launched a massive counter-offensive that drove the Germans back and saved the capital. On December 7, 1941, the war became truly global when Japan attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. Japan had been at war with China since 1937 and had occupied French Indochina, leading the United States to impose crippling economic sanctions, including an oil embargo. Faced with the choice of backing down or going to war, Japan chose war, hoping a devastating surprise attack would force America to negotiate. Instead, it unified American public opinion and brought the industrial might of the United States into the war. Germany and Italy, honoring their alliance with Japan, declared war on America a few days later. The period from late 1941 through mid-1942 was the darkest time for the Allies. Japan conquered the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, Burma, and the Dutch East Indies, creating a vast empire. In North Africa, German forces threatened Egypt and the Suez Canal. German submarines were sinking hundreds of Allied ships in the Atlantic. In the Soviet Union, Germans launched a new offensive toward the Caucasus oil fields and the city of Stalingrad. But then the tide began to turn. In June 1942, Americans won a decisive naval victory at Midway, sinking 4 Japanese carriers. In November 1942, British forces defeated the Germans at El Alamein in Egypt. Most crucially, the Battle of Stalingrad became a turning point. The fight for this city turned into the most brutal urban combat in history, with soldiers fighting room by room through the ruins. In November, the Soviets encircled the German Sixth Army. Hitler refused to allow a breakout, and in February 1943, the starving remnants surrendered. It was a catastrophic defeat that shattered German military prestige and marked the beginning of a long, bloody retreat from the Soviet Union. In 1943 and 1944, the Allies steadily closed in on Germany from all directions. Soviets pushed westward from the east in massive offensives that cost millions of lives but steadily liberated Soviet territory and pushed into Eastern Europe. In July 1943, Allies invaded Sicily and then mainland Italy. Italy overthrew Mussolini and surrendered, though fighting continued as Germans occupied much of the country. Allied bombers pounded German cities day and night, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians and devastating industrial production. The decisive blow came on June 6, 1944, D-Day. Over 150,000 American, British, and Canadian troops landed on the beaches of Normandy in the largest amphibious invasion in history. Despite fierce resistance, they established a foothold and began pushing inland. Paris was liberated on August 25. By September, Allied forces had liberated France and Belgium and were approaching Germany's borders. In early 1945, the end was near. Soviet forces pushed into Germany from the east, while Americans and British advanced from the west. The horrors of the Nazi regime were fully revealed as Allied forces liberated concentration camps and discovered the full scale of the Holocaust. The Nazis had systematically murdered 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, in an industrial genocide unprecedented in human history. In April, as Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, Hitler committed suicide in his underground bunker. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over, but the war in the Pacific continued. Japan still controlled a vast empire and showed no signs of surrendering. American forces had been island hopping across the Pacific in brutal battles where Japanese soldiers fought to the death. The closer Americans got to Japan, the fiercer the resistance became. Planners estimated that invading Japan itself might cost 1 million Allied casualties and many times that number of Japanese deaths. Then came the decision that ended the war and changed human history. The United States had secretly developed atomic weapons in a massive project called the Manhattan Project. On August 6, 1945, an American bomber dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, instantly killing an estimated 80,000 people and leveling the city. When Japan still didn't surrender, a second bomb destroyed Nagasaki on August 19. The sheer destructive power of these weapons, combined with the Soviet Union's declaration of war on Japan and invasion of Manchuria, finally convinced Japan's leaders to surrender. On August 15, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender in a radio broadcast, the first time most Japanese had ever heard their emperor's voice. The formal surrender ceremony took place on September 2 and aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. World War II was over, but at an almost incomprehensible cost. Over 70 million people had died, more than half of them civilians. Entire cities had been destroyed. The Holocaust had murdered 6 million Jews in history's most systematic genocide. The atomic bomb had introduced a weapon that could end human civilization. Europe was in ruins, and two new superpowers, the United States and Soviet Union, would soon face off in the Cold War. The world that emerged from World War II was fundamentally different from the one that had entered it. And that brings us to the end of this incredible journey through World War II. I hope this video has given you a deeper understanding, not just of what happened, but why it happened and what it meant for our world. The lessons of World War II remain relevant today, reminding us of the dangers of appeasing aggression, the importance of defending democracy and human rights, and the catastrophic consequences when nationalism and hatred are allowed to run unchecked. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone who loves history. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Drop a comment below telling me what historical topic you'd like to see next. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.